So I think. Let me double check with Rose. Let me see. Oh yeah, she she's having issues too.
Oh
Oh
no.
well. You finally make it and no one shows up. You're bad luck.
Oh man.
But you know,
I'm glad to have filled the void, like, when nobody could make it.
hell yeah. So there was things that I was working on, which I think you might be interested in just to. So the last time we were here, Curry Hobo brought up about etymology and about
Uh-huh.
he was at a cafe and the cashier, somebody said to this group of people, you guys have a nice day. And then the I guess one of the girls in the group took offense to it and said, we don't appreciate you using gender language. And it was like this kind of like weird
Oh
thing.
man.
And so Curry was just like, he just found it curious and interesting. And so then he was just curious and said, let me check up the root of guys.
Uh-huh.
And so a guide, it comes from guide or guide, and back in the day it used to be like a link in a chain, and they used to throw the chain and like it was some like totally had nothing to do with gender or anything, right? But then
Mhm.
it kind of gets gendered later. Someone uses it as to mean like a hobo. Look at that guide, because later it morphed into being a leader, but then they used it as like for sarcasm. And then for whatever reason, because it's just how the language is structured, so gendered that it starts becoming kind of used in that way. But also, too, people use it on all sorts of ways. And so, anyways, he wanted to look up team and human. And as
Uh-huh.
we were doing this, Elliot makes this post about Wyrd, and it made me think of this thing that I was doing on Steam, and I had this I was doing this like weird artwork collage stuff, and
Uh-huh.
I would pair it with quotes. And as it was developing, I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna make this into a collection." I called it, I think it was Chaos and Weird Collection. I just I just kind of like whatever word. And as I was using this, someone responded and said, "Oh, you know what? It's interesting is weird. The root word of it has to do with I don't know if she said it exactly the proper way, but she said has to do with kind of like it has a spiritual sense how they used to use it back in the day, and
Oh, I think I
it
heard that.
comes from fate, and it was like
Yeah.
I think first really used in Beowulf as
Yeah.
like the fate of the gods, and this was like the your fate was weird or word, and it was Wyrd, and then later becomes weird, and it morphs into this kind of like force or fate or destiny that it was used in the beginning, and then later Shakespeare uses as the weird sisters, but even before that, they started to use the word weird to mean kind of like a sorcerer or a witch. So it
Mm.
kind of becomes like a pejorative. And then later now we use it as something odd or strange as weird. But when she mentioned about how it used to have the spiritual sense to it, and before I even looked up the etymology of it, it just something clicked in me and said, you know, I never really realized it or was aware of this, but I use weird to mean something supernatural in sometimes or something that's
Yeah.
synchronistic. Like I had this weird feeling, which usually refers to some like deja vu feeling, or I had this
Mhm.
weird dream last night. Like for instance, there was so I talk to Rose like all the time on Slack, and she tells me that she was I guess like looking at adopting pets or whatever, and she sends me this picture of this dog and that she wants to go see about like adopting it or whatever. She tells me this whole story, and then she talks about her dog who passed away like a year ago, and she gives me this whole story, right? And during this whole time, she's telling me, it was like, "You want to hear something weird? I had a dream about my old dog that passed away a year ago, and the dream was about getting a new dog. And in the dream, we were supposed to get this dog, and everybody was saying that it looked like our old dog. Her name was Carol, and I was telling everybody that doesn't look like Carol. I want a dog that looks like Carol. And then everybody's like, no, that's it. She's the dog that looks exactly like Carol. I was like, no, she doesn't. And so I was like, that's weird because I didn't say anything to her about it, but she tells me a story about her dog that died a year ago and her wanting to replace it or thinking about adopting a new dog. And I was like, but I had a dream that's basically the same, my version of that story that you're saying. I was like, that's weird. And that's how I use the word weird. Like, I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. But if you notice, when you experience something kind of synchronistic, deja vu-ish,
yeah,
that makes a deeper connection within the chaos of life, I kind of response is weird. And I didn't know until that person told me what the root word of it was weird. And I dug deep into the word weird, and it's interesting what they were saying about it. So here's just a little bit of this whole essay that I read, or this I think. But anyways, to begin with, the language itself, many words are that express the concept of weird are derived from the English root meaning to shape. Destiny means literally that which is shaped. The verb means to destiny or to shape. One of the most frequently used words, God, literally shaper. Since the motif of weird as inexplicable arbitrator men's struggles resounding through the Anglo-Saxons canon like the choir of symphony of nature and faith and shaping in the Old English should not be surprising. The singers of the canons were always aware of the events of their lives have been shaped by the forces beyond their control. So I like this whole kind of thing about the shaper or sculpting, carefully crafting the form of man's faith, molding a rough edges and smoothing out the curves until the work took its final cast in the moments of death. And so, this faith that moves you through life and all this kind of stuff. But as I read more into this essay about how it was originally used in Beowulf, and there's a lot of underlying contention about how it's been molded and translated over time, and a lot of people argue that now the version that we got has been like maybe influenced by the Christian monks that did it, and maybe they had some bias of it, so maybe we don't know exactly. But which I find interesting too, which this woman was arguing about in the poetry of it. There's like contradictions, and she was arguing that the contradiction is not with maybe the intent of the poet, but the contradictions within ourselves is that we're trying to make it in our own mind. Or if you take the Christian view of like God's destiny or faith, of how they used it, but she's trying to argue that in the past it had a little bit more fluidness to what they meant as destiny or faith, and she used examples within the poem that they use. So not only is there the weird or the force or the destiny within, it was more of a force than a personality of God's like will, but also to what creates this tension throughout it is that Beowulf, and they used a lot referring to his hands. So his hands would symbolize his own faith, his own hands to shape his destiny. And there's this kind of conflict of both. And there's lines in there that are saying about how that even if it was kind of the fate of the gods in our modern terms of it, that there was still the way the warrior or the fighter took up his destiny. And so, I've been thinking about this a lot because we've been like in different parts, we're dancing around this thing, right? And Mac was kind of talking about the poet and this and that in like struggling times, and it just reminded me of me kind of going back to formulate my own stuff. So, Joseph Campbell would say that the shamans were the first poets, and I just have this picture. It's pieced together by reading like Joseph Campbell and Douglas Rushkoff mentions this one story too, and all this stuff that I deal with. But our hunter gatherer selves sitting around the campfire, and in the darkness of night, all around us, kind of like this. There's a scene in 2001: Space Odyssey where the apes are gathered around, and then you can hear this like saber-toothed tiger, and they're all like scared and huddled. So the nocturnal predator animals would always be around us, and the darkness, and we would be like in fear. And it wasn't until that one person stepped up on the rock and told a story. These epic stories of like Beowulf and Gilgamesh and the Odyssey and all these stories, right? These myths that they used to do, the oral tradition. And they had some version of this, of the tension between the fates of the natural unfolding destiny, but also our own will to be able to forge our own narrative, our own destiny. And it kind of comes back to this thing, which why maybe I like to use programmed or be programmed. It's the same concept that there are underlining forces that are programming us, but also too we can be the hackers and creators and poets that also program, and that this own tension, we still have our hands, our own will to be able to control how we respond to things, control how we react to things, to choose different paths. Like what you were saying, your work-life balance, and maybe you weren't totally fulfilled in your one path, and then you just decided maybe I should try something else. And so you took your own hands to shape your own path and took a different path, right? Mm-hmm. And that we all have that within us. And it to broaden it out to this moment and in this time, that we, the fates, the ominous weird that is happening all around us, we have no control over this virus, right? Or we have we have little to no control over the way our economic and government system is reacting to this, and what is to unfold afterwards, which is very ominous and scary to me. Right. But at the same time, I have my own ability to create my own weird with my own hands and to shape it. That Terence McKenna used to say, the artist passes to save the soul of mankind. Anything else is diddling while Rome burns. And I don't at this moment and in this time, it seems even more important, at least for my own self, to use my own hands, my own words to create, because like the mixtapes that I'm doing with this are called Creating the Weird. And I did it before I even was conscious of formulating what I'm saying now. Is that ironically or poetically, I'm seeing more and more importance and value of what I kind of flippantly like said, because I just liked that word. I just liked, find the others and create the weird. I heard it on his podcast, not totally consciously thinking about it, and just doing this until this moment was like, oh man, do we need that more now than ever?
Yeah.
Do we need now more than ever using this time to reflect and to ask these questions of ourselves, but also of our greater society? Can we send out these alternative memes in this meme war that is happening out there? You know, there was something really interesting that Doug said in this article, and he said something to the effect that he wrote Team Human book like he wrote other books, and they're about his research and creating a narrative around whatever subject and information that he wanted to communicate. And so, about throwing rocks at the Google bus, about our overrun, what do you call capitalist society, and how it created this like mutant thing, and why it's doing what it's doing. Media virus, about the new information, how information gets out there. Uh, Siberia, about the dawn of this whole new digital age, and so forth and so on. Future shock or whatever. But Team Human was something different. He saw it as cultural medicine, as a media virus, as a cultural sigil to help in this sense create antibodies and antidotes to the corrosive memes that he's been seeing out there and that he's been feeling out there. And when he formulated in that, I was like, oh yeah, that's why I like him, because he seems to be able to encapsulate ideas and thoughts so superb, and then I just like using them and ripping them up. But so this is something more interesting, which Mac was bringing up, and I was listening to this podcast after he said it, but he said he's been curious and thinking, and he hasn't been able to really formulate it, but he's so interested of how this virus is spreading, but also to how the memes and how there's some correlation or something. And there was these experts, health experts, and then there was this one guy who's a physicist somewhere in Europe. But anyways, he's a physicist, but he was looking at it as data, and they were both talking about the pandemic, but also, which I don't know if I necessarily like this framing of it, but I think they're calling it an infodemic, about the spread of misinformation. And he was saying that he's been tracking it as far as the data of it. And he said the misinformation, at first, sometimes it comes from top down, like China trying to not send out the right information and saying, oh, it's just this or that, right? And they're sending that out to the world. And there's different competing forces out there about sending out misinformation and how it propagates. And it said the misinformation was coming out before the virus was spreading, but I don't know exactly how he's modeling this, but he says mathematically the spreads are the same, that they have this, as far as the exponential growth of them. He says they mirror each other. The spread of the misinformation and memes mirror the same virality of this virus. And when he said it like that, it's like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. Yeah. And it's it's so interesting and strange. It goes to one of my I kind of in my weird own thoughts as I steal this from Robert Anton Wilson. He says, I don't believe in anything, I just have my suspicions. And that's one of my heavy suspicions is about like the fractal nature of things. And so in my own loose framing of this, that makes sense to me. Now, whether it's totally true or not, I'm not too sure, but it seems to be this way. And that this goes back to what Doug has been saying more recently about we need. So they have this kind of like people frame it as the war on misinformation or people trying to fight these troll farms or whatever, right? All the stupid stuff, even prior to this. And he's like, if we think of it in an actual media virus and things going viral, we use that term viral, right? That the real thing is instead of like fighting these different strands of memes, that it's better for the person to create his own antibodies for it. We need herd immunity to the dis and misinformation and to these corrosive ideas that are out there. And I think we're talking about how in one respect too, how we have hollowed out our economic system and government, and now it's getting a stress test and it's not holding up so great to it. We collectively have hollowed out our healthcare system, but also to our own personal immunity and health, so that when we have something foreign and novel come in, that a lot of us are not holding up to that stress test so well. Also, too, in our media environment and this consumerism advertised attention model has hollowed out our culture and our arts. So now we can't handle this corrosive ideas, and that we're all subjected that these things are exploiting the vulnerabilities in all levels of reality, right? And it's just at the same time too, I think this is an interesting high leverage point for us as a species. And
critical moment.
Yeah, and you see it you already see it bubbling up with the I can't fathom if and I know not everybody is gonna realize this, but a good significant portion how and you already see these memes of it, of what is deemed essential work, right? It's not the Wall Street people that are deemed essential. It's the janitors, the people that work at markets, pharmacists, doctors, nurses, police, EMTs. Those are essential work. And even the politicians that are working from home, they're not deemed that essential either. Like it can't be like more obvious, and how much atrophy that the system couldn't handle a few days of people just being at home. That's mind-boggling. That they're now they're creating narratives to say, we should test. There was a CEO of some financial firm saying, we should test the young and healthy to go back to work and to see if they get sick and see if it's all right. And maybe some of them would die. And I'm just like, what?
Oh my God.
What? Are you guys literally testing to see? Let's see if some people die. But we need our stock portfolios to go back up. I was like, dude, this is insanity. But there's already people saying about, and I totally think about this too. Like, dude, what if enough people just say no? We're gonna wait until you guys could show us that it is actually safe. I mean, our numbers are here in the States are going up like crazy. We're 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 doing bad, and we're nowhere near our peak yet. And we you're telling us to go back to work, but we don't even see the response being coherent, or you guys don't have your shit together either. Like, dude, let's solve this first, and then maybe go back. But if they overreach, I think enough people would say, like, they're already forming this in New York about rent strike and different patches of sanitation workers and the trash can workers are saying, if you want us to go out there, you better start giving us better healthcare because I don't want to. I have healthcare, but my premiums are too high. And it's like, if I get sick, and my job's already hazardous as it is, but if I get sick, I can't afford that. Like, you gotta be like, if you're gonna tell me to go out there, you better cover my expenses. Yeah. And I think, like, it couldn't be more obvious.
Everything's just laid bare.
Yeah, and I hope, and I don't know what's gonna happen. That's what makes this moment so interesting. Is, would there be enough people? And I think of the old framing of it. I was listening to these guys talk, and they're saying the problem is that we can't have protests out in the streets. Yeah, you can't, right? It's can't have groups, but that's an old way of thinking of what a protest should be or can be. If everybody just literally stays home, that's a protest in itself. If enough people refuse to pay their rent, that's a protest. Old school kind of like labor strikes. But if we just simply say, no, we're not going to do that, and that's, you guys are crazy. We see our numbers are on exponential growth, and there's the scary part is it seems like there's a whole fracture of awareness about this. I mean, of certain states and acting like, oh, we don't. The Louisiana governor said, we're not California, we're not New York. And then but
it's right there.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's happening in their state, and they don't understand that per capita, their infection rate is worse than California. Yeah, we may have more people that are affected here, at least the ones that tested, but our population's bigger than yours. But per capita, your situation is getting worse than ours, and you're choosing not to, because that's some culture war bullshit. That's a liberal way of thinking of solving the problem. Okay, I don't understand it, but and I don't know what's going to happen in that sense. You're already seeing, like, Florida finally admitting the reality of the situation. Yeah. And it's just, so we have no idea what is going to happen, and there is a problem of the narrative that Donald Trump is trying to spin, and the media has not, or at least the mainstream media does not know how to combat. I've been saying from the beginning, instead of focusing on his lies when this first Corona stuff started happening, way before shit hit the fan, when he first was saying, "Oh, this is no problem, it's gonna go away in a week," and I kept on being like, "Dude, you guys are framing it wrong. You guys are, oh, Trump is lying. Oh, Trump is doing that." I was like, no. Yes, he is lying, but that's not the main problem. The main problem is failure of leadership. He's failing at leading the situation, and is progressively becoming more relevant, but they want to still nitpick on his line, which is a problem, but it's not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is his failure of leadership, and that central idea permeates almost all his actions. When he becomes petty and says, "Oh, they, if they don't
The praising of
show
the governor.
praising me, I'm like, I don't want to talk to them." That's a failure
Yeah, that's so
of
messed
leadership.
up. Yeah.
Yes, it's petty. Yes, it's narcissistic. But the main point is, in this moment, we need him to lead the country and to lead the federal response to this thing. And the problem is not the surface level stuff. The problem is that failure of leadership, and should keep on being framed that way and keep on being messaged that way throughout. But the Democrats are so weak at their messaging that and all this kind of stuff. It just infuriates me so much. But there, and I think this is happening already, where you're seeing them change their narrative so much, right? Before it was, oh, there's no big problem, it's just like the flu. Now Sean Hannity was like the main guy, and now he's changing his tune. And Fox News is acting like they never said any of that stuff, and they said, "Oh, we got to take this seriously." Like, there's a time when reality bumps up against your false narrative. It's
man.
because and I have no faith in Joe Biden, but the case.
God, we didn't learn anything from 2016.
We didn't. And in a lot of ways, even for this moment, I think we possibly have a worse candidate than Hillary, which is hard to say. Because it's insanity what is happening as far as the response to Trump and this. But there needs to be, and maybe this happens at a grassroots independent way, a narrative of showing through. And I know not a lot of people respond so much to statistics and the data, but also there would have to be a better drawn out narrative, but rooted in look at how statistically how we handled the situation. We have the most infections so far. Yeah. And we don't know what the death toll is going to be, but it is not shaping out. We're going to have several states that are going to be equivalent to Italy, it seems like.
Yeah, and we're like so early on in this too, like because we're delayed.
Yeah, we're delayed, and and Trump is still dragging his feet. They told him for like a week that he needs to do the ventilators, and it wasn't until he got everybody trashing him about it that he finally took up the power that he wanted, and he's so weird. He's so weird. He's so weird, and that there needs to be this whole kind of. Yeah, that's the wrong word. He's so dumb. Like he's what I keep on saying about him, to me, he's aggressively stupid. Yeah. It's so aggressively stupid that it hurts me. and it's so funny because in some circles, I don't like talk this way for various different reasons, but at once you say that, and I even was getting this, prior to the whole election thing, I would like make fun of Trump or whatever, and then be like, "Oh, you like Hillary?" It's like, no, I don't like Hillary either. It's like, and then so like I would call, in some circles, I'll call Trump aggressively stupid. It's like, "Oh, you mainstream media, blah blah blah." This and that. I was like, I don't like him either. I actually hate that I'm in a situation where I want so. Prior to this, even Bernie versus Hillary, that's when I had to change my political affiliation because I was independent before that. Now, kind of like politics, this and that. And then when that happened, I was like, oh my God, I want to vote in the primary. And so I was like, oh, God damn it, I'm going to have to change myself to Democrat. And I hated it. I hated that that Trump and all this weirdness and how stupid they are forced me to do this horrible thing.
I feel you.
So, yeah. But
man,
I don't know.
At least you got to vote in that primary. I got purged.
Yeah. Yeah, you got purged. I remember you telling me. Fuck. The sad thing is, and I don't know, maybe, and I see Bernie and his group changing their focus, which is important. Yeah. And I hope at some point, because I wasn't necessarily that much invested in it as I saw like other people, but it could be so demoralizing for younger people that maybe got a little excited and they thought, okay, here we go, we have a chance, and then all of a sudden it seemed like so strange how all of a sudden Joe Biden magically started winning when he wasn't even placing, and
it started off so well. I remember the early debates. Yeah. I was like, "There's so many different ideas here."
Yeah,
and then
and then now it collapsed into fucking the same old bullshit.
We need choice voting, man. We need that shit.
Yeah. But I hope that those people that are maybe, and I still think there's still a lot of present shock in the moment, but hopefully people like AOC, Bernie, Rashida Tlaib, and they can hopefully tell these people that there is still things that we can leverage, and that if we get so disillusioned that we drop out in this sense and we lose our focus. I mean, this whole fucking bill that they just passed, yeah, it's horrible. It's so horrible. I view it, and we don't know exactly how it's going to shape out, but like, you're letting Steve Mnuchin, who was right in central in the last housing crisis, who manipulated the system to make money off of the crisis, who once helped create the crisis, but also to then exploited the situation to make the crisis, but also to profit off the crisis, is insane but what are we gonna do, right? And he's the one that has the discretionary to send, $500 billion or even more to these companies to do God knows what with. That we're gonna have even more concentrated power in the marketplace, or Amazon, Walmart, and Costco are going to be the only options, because they're raking in, and these little mom and pop shops are not going to survive. And even if they do survive, are they going to be able to compete with the strengthening? Or already they couldn't compete with Amazon and them, and they're only getting stronger during this time. Oh my God.
Hard, yeah. And friggin' Amazon too, like, they're getting the data advantage as well.
Oh yeah, hell yeah.
They're playing the long game on this one, and it's
yeah. Amazon is so primed to leverage. I mean, they've already been doing this, but this is an opportunity for them, because one, people are now ordering so much, and they're, like you said, they're using it more, and they just have all of this access to it, and they're already primed to keep on, they're testing out the drones and doing all this kind of stuff. And that, I was reading this one article that this moment is even more prime to make the case for automation, and these people to leverage this moment to accelerate that pace.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like what kind of Yang was arguing, if it's not coupled with this kind of everybody having a stake in this accelerated future, then like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's gonna be totally not even like um like um a super caste system where there's only two. Whereas everybody else regular people, and then our overlords.
Oh, man.
But there still is, like I said, like it's so crazy that even though that has happened, and I think they don't even understand the scale of this situation. And Trump, I guarantee he's going to keep on pushing for the people to go back to work too early. That is only going to make this situation longer than it needs to be, and that the longer that it goes on and the worse it gets, I can't see how there won't be at least a critical tipping point of people being able to realize that we, as essential workers, right, could leverage enough for for them to do. It's not even the right thing to do. The only feasible thing to keep
Yeah.
our society going is that.
I just hope, we can direct it efficiently and not be like, having random scapegoats in society.
Yeah, I doubt it's going to be efficiently. But who knows? I mean, this opportunity, and you see a little bit too, that maybe certain people with good ideas can step up and bring forward uh, um, something better. But at the same time, it's, I forgot, I was reading this other article too, and they were saying that even though we have this moment, right, this moment of a tipping point, or where everything, it seems like everything's up for grabs, like no one knows what's going on, we're kind of like spinning our wheels, and there's all this. Everybody's still in shock, but that even the I forgot how he referred to them, the tech billionaires, whatever, are still in this, still kind of seeing what's going on, but it's still not, are like on the sidelines because they still benefit, materially from this. But there was a good sign, which I don't think any of these people want to necessarily realize, and I don't think anybody fully realizes this. And even though there is so much toxicity in the media ad space, but Bloomberg did not get any traction. So you cannot just carpet bomb.
That was such a relief. Oh my
Yeah.
God, that would have been.
I was scared. I was like, oh my God, I hope this doesn't work. This is going to be the worst thing ever. But it didn't work. You could waste $1 billion carpet bombing people with ads, and it doesn't work. So this whole thing that the attention economy and a lot of our media comedy is resting on, it doesn't work the way they think it works. And I don't think anybody really knows how it works. Because I still have no idea how the whole Biden thing worked.
For sure.
how how did that happen?
It's because the
No one
narrative
knows.
is, like he's got the best chance of beating Trump, so
Yeah,
people are
yeah,
voting in fear. They're voting in fear.
yeah. Oh, totally. Because you look at the exit polls, more people agreed with Bernie's platform. I said, yeah, all this stuff
Yeah.
seems important, but what is the critical decision? The critical decision was like, we want the best candidate to beat Trump, and apparently everybody says that Biden is it, and I don't think they follow it as they follow it passively, right? They
Yeah,
may
I mean,
be,
they thought
yeah,
2016 Hillary had a better chance at beating him than Bernie, and we saw how that went.
yeah. We saw how that worked out. It's crazy, crazy times, man, crazy times.
Yeah.
But it was good, good catching up with you, man. Hopefully,
I know, right? Yeah.
you can hang out more in Team Human. You know, I'll start tagging you more in the stuff. You.
I know.
Uh,
I've vanished from Minds
there's
for a bit, and it's
yeah, I
I
understand.
can't say
I
I
know.
can put my heart into it. Yeah, you know what I mean. I'm so busy these days, and I'll come on and
Yeah.
like read your stuff, but like, yeah, I don't know. I want to see the site go in a good direction, but I'm on the fence still.
Oh hell yeah, I know. I'm. I
I
I
feel
feel
you.
you,
Yeah.
but my weirdness transcends any platform.
Yes.
My magic is stronger than most magic. It was funny. Rose was saying something. She was like worried about like someone, and she's like, oh, I don't know this and that about somebody. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she's telling me about some user, right? She's like, I don't know how to interact with them. This and that. I was like, really? I was like, you have beef with them? And I was just like curious what she was saying, and it was like, I guess that person talks to this other person that she has real issues with, and she was worried that she doesn't know how much to communicate, and she's getting all this kind of like slightly paranoid or whatever. I kind of understand because I know more of her history or whatever. But I was like, dude, don't worry about that user. Who cares about them? It's like one. I was like, it's like I got your back, and my magic is stronger than their magic. I was like, you'll be all right. I'll handle them if I don't think anything crazy will happen, but don't worry.
That's a good attitude to take, to do your thing and like not worry so much about like just external factors that muck things up. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, I actually, it's so funny. I I don't really boost any of my stuff, and there's sometimes where, well, but I like the challenge of it in the sense, and that's why I've been more. Um, my stuff is couched in like this weird poetic language, um,
Mm.
so that it had in my view, and I even if I agree with certain narratives, um, I my attention with a lot of this stuff is to be almost consciously um, being something different
Mm.
than a normal media that I see. I like a lot of these podcasts or even these web shows, and I'm into them, but that's not what I do.
Yeah, you got your style. Like I like your style. It's like
Yeah,
it's something that I don't see anywhere else. It's cool.
yeah, and it's just it's so interesting how it keeps on evolving in my own head, and I tell even the more stuff that I'm doing now, which is a funny story. So Rose, I told you, and I didn't end up going to New York because my cousin couldn't get the time off or whatever, and we were just going to
Oh,
spend a
okay.
couple of days there. And so like it didn't end up happening. But I did go around. We went to Seattle. Then we shot over to the East Coast. Stood with my sister. Went down, and we went to a bunch of different places in the middle of America or whatever, right? So I told Rose that I'm going across country and this and that. And I forgot exactly how the conversation went, but she mentioned something that she wrote me a letter. And I'm like, what? I was like, when are you going to send that? And she's like, oh, I'm not going to send it to you. And then why are you telling me? I was like, that's totally unfair. And then so like the next day I told her, hey, I wrote you the best letter that was ever written. And I burned it last night. and then so like later I was thinking, well, it was just a joke. I didn't actually do it, right? And then I was like, I should actually like write her something. That would be cool. And like I've always kind of like what I said when we were in the Team Human thing, I thought it was a interesting, cool idea to do. So I took this opportunity when I was going around. I got her address and I said, oh, I'm going to send her some postcards. So I get a couple of postcards from my trip, and then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna write a postcard, and it's gonna be epic. It's gonna be awesome. Then I sit there, and I'm like, holy shit, what am I gonna write? And it's so funny because I'm like hyping it up in my head. I'm like, oh, I could just write. I write all the time. This is gonna be nothing. This is gonna be cool. I talk to her all the time. We message each other like every day. And then I'm like, oh my god, what am I gonna write? And then so I start writing, right?
Space on a postcard.
yeah. And so I have this little space, and it took me a couple of lines to even get to any type of point that I was getting towards. And I'm like, holy shit, I should just write her a letter because I have no space. And then I'm like, okay, let me get the next one. And I think it was like too deep into the postcards where I finally got it. Like the restriction of the space kind of helped me to write in this kind of cut up poetic a mosaic where each card would be its own thing, but also to thinking that it could also link up to every postcard. So nice. So I was thinking it's like a letter, but in its own individual piece, and this goes with my whole way of how I do stuff that I do. It's all collages. I always talk about mosaic of minds and all this kind of stuff, right? So once I had the concept in my head, then it became better and easier. And I would do like groupings where I'll like have 3 at a time. And it's funny because later she shows me a picture of her refrigerator and she had the postcards there. And I purposely picked cool ones too that I liked, right? And then I'm like, oh, I didn't have to directly tell her or them. I think one of her sons like put them in different ways because there was somewhat of a theme of how I picked aesthetically the pictures and stuff like that. And they arranged them into kind of a mosaic on the front side of it on their refrigerator. I'm like, oh shit, like that's cool. And so like any one piece stands on itself, but it also is linked to the other ones in how it goes. And then like later I write her a letter, and to do that, I thought a postcard is just the original Twitter. the restriction of the space, the character limits. Like, dude, there's nothing new under the sun. People were doing what we did, but they didn't have that added value of like blasting it to the whole fucking dirty laundry to the whole public, which is a whole weird thing, Yeah. But it was funny and interesting us exchanging postcards. But it was funny too. So later I write her a letter, right? And I wanted to make it look cool. And so like I have this like Mexican folk art coloring book. So it has like all these crazy Mexican like crazy artwork, which has like a lot of like flowers and like these weird little kind of like fractal designs with the flowers and the vines. And sometimes they have like the Virgin Mary, but a lot of it is just like the jungle or like all these like kind of weird flowers, stars, and strange animals. And I used to do this a lot when I was back in college when I was doing daycare with kids. It's so funny. I went to Alvera Street and then I bought it, and I thought, oh, this would be kind of cool thing. And it was a little bit more advanced because it had so many details. But I was like, maybe some of the older kids will get into this. But I ended up getting more into it than anybody else. I was spending like hours just coloring. So then I brought that out, and I'm like, okay. And so I wrote the letter like in a couple of hours, right? And I spent the next 3 days coloring and putting the different little things on there. And I'm like, okay, Daniel, you need to stop. You are getting obsessive with this coloring. The coloring's taking way more energy and time than the letter did.
That's awesome. Hey, that's the best part. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the best part. But that's all to say that it was funny because I had this idea to write Rose a proper letter, and like this. I don't know why, but I was thinking like correspondence. You read these great letters from like the Civil War. It's like, dear blah blah blah, and the savannah was dry and the tea was sweet, and I had to suture a leg and blah blah blah. 7 scores ago or whatever, right? I was thinking this epic, like weird letter in my head. So I sit down to write, and I'm like, holy shit, I can't do this because my mind is working in poetic verse and like analyzing myself as I like say things and doing these inner jokes. So it oscillates from like my inner dialogue of like, I wanted to write you a proper letter, but I can't possibly do that because all I want to do is exchange these weird insights. Then I go into like a poem, and then I zoom out like, oh my god, like just about like, I can't believe this is happening, and I feel like this, and this reminds me of this, and I read this book, and then I collapse back into like poetry. But I had like this meta narrative analysis of like doing the thing that I'm saying I'm doing, and I just laugh because this is what me and Rose were doing in the open mic poetry. So we would share our poems, right? And I kind of like forced her to go. But meanwhile, all the time on Slack, we have these conversations that spark these kind of like poetic responses. I even told her like, I'm gonna the sub channel in the Slack room, and then all I want there is to be nothing but responding back to each other poetically, like none of the like real straight talk. Like this is just all abstract. And so we started getting this habit of doing that, right? And then now we kind of have our own like where we talk about like the mundanity of life, but then we always like play around with words and shoot out these like insights or like ramble on about whatever's bothering us or whatever. So we're always oscillating through these different ways of doing stuff and sharing, of course, whatever we're interested, articles, whatever, music or whatever. And so that's how I wrote the letter too. And then so later when I tell her after she gets the letter, I wanted to talk to her. We talked on one of these like gatherings. I was like, like literally, that's how I think, write, and talk now. Like what we developed our style, and we used to do these. I think you probably maybe seen these. I call them the collective poetic expressions of me and her having like poetic dialogue, and there's like 5 of them, and they progressively get longer. That's just how we communicate. And even say in the letter like how that is more naturally me than any other like thing I could express. And I'm glad
Oh
like
wow.
you understand that. And so that all is to say that my creative relationship with her has developed. And even though, before I was kind of doing similar things that I'm doing now, but I think it's even more formed in the videos that I do, right? You oscillate between like this intro, like some poetic intro, that may or may not have really directly to do with what we talk about. Then you have like these snippets of just us like vibing and talking, and like no prepping of it, of like telling the listener what they're really listening to. It's like if you just walked into people being stoned and like having ranting and raving, right? Then if we bring up something important of a topic, then I mix in like, I was we did this one bucket full of books, reality hunger, and I might start talking about this poem that I wrote one before, but I did a music video of it, the unconscious tape loop, so I throw that in there, and so then you have the music video, but then we start talking about the book, then I insert the actual author on some interview talking about the book. And I do this a lot with Doug, right? I mention something Doug says, and then I drop in like a produced video of him talking set to music or whatever. And then so it's like oscillating between, not only us like talking about the material, but also bringing in the actual like source material of it. But then, juxtaposition of something else, that some other tangent that comes into my head. And, and so like I just keep on doing that, which um maybe I'm gonna probably I'm done with it. I was planning to post it tomorrow. I'll tag you in it, but maybe I'll even like send it
Okay,
to you
cool.
directly. It's the first
Yeah.
creating the Wyrd mixtape, and
Okay.
this part is like the more fully formed of it. It's so I think it's cool. But this is my magic spell that I'm putting on Doug. I think what because I kept on trying to tell him what I was thinking, but I was like, oh, I don't think he's totally understanding what I'm saying. He's like, oh yeah, sure. A monthly poetic thing sounds fun. It's like, oh, you don't know, you have no idea. You have no idea what I'm talking about. I was like, but I'm gonna show you. So I send him the clips. Like, oh yeah, this and this, and he's like, oh man, this is cool. And then he's like, well, maybe he did one of the last ones. He said he's like, maybe I'll have more time to do something fun. So and I want, it's like no pressure whether he does it or not. It was kind of like what I used to say about Ottman. Whether he shows up or not, I'm going to mix in his words anyways. Actually, I think it's more interesting if I create a whole show where Ottman's not there, but I just clip his voice into it. I remember I told Ottman that he kind of laughed nervously. I was like, I don't mean it in a weird way or anything. It's just funny for my own expression. But yeah, anyways, it was cool, man. Keep
Yeah,
in
it was good
touch.
talking to you. Definitely.
Yeah, I'm always up to something, and Team Human's always here for us to create the weird.
Oh yes. Hey, did you ever do
But
the discussion on the book, or
no, not really.
we should do
That's
that?
We definitely need to do that. I, it's so funny that we were supposed to do it. Then Rose had to bow out, and I was like, oh, I wanted her to be there, and so I rescheduled it, right? Which I always tell myself as a principal, it's never good to do that. So then I rescheduled it, and then like no one showed up. Then I just kind of morphed it into this like general Team Human gathering thing. But we definitely need to dive into the book because it's so important. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well,
maybe next month sometime I'll try to organize that.